Okay, I wanted to make this video because I've been thinking about this a little bit, and I think there is something that could be done to make the game a little bit more enjoyable and a little bit more fluid. So this is just an idea. Hold my hands up, there's probably loads of things wrong with it, but it's come into my head and I've been thinking about it and I wanted to tell you. So for me, one of the frustrating things about this league has been the lack of interaction I've had with the new boss. I haven't seen the new boss. I've played 3 characters to 92, 94 and 90, and I haven't seen the new boss. I have killed 14 distant memories which contain a boss, and yet a new boss has not spawned. Maybe I am playing the system incorrectly. I believe sometimes you need to do higher level memories for the boss to spawn. Um, Maybe I'm doing that wrong, who knows, but the game doesn't really explain at all on how to spawn the boss or how to get the boss to appear or anything like that. There's no, when you press U, it doesn't explain anything, like how it explains to push the shaper influence around. There's no explanation. So it's either watch a GGZII video, watch a developer commentary, watch a podcast, or try ask on Reddit to try figure out the league mechanic, or look at some data mined information. And to me, if you're having to do that, there's a problem with how the league communicates itself to the players. So I've been thinking like what I would enjoy about the game, and it's just some small changes that could be done. So one of the things I think players enjoyed were how simple certain leagues were on how to get a boss. So to not bore you, if we played Abyss League, you would run around, some Abyss monsters would spawn. You would then chase the Abyss, and occasionally it would turn into a Depths. The players then recognised, okay, this is different. This doesn't normally happen, so we're in a stage 2. So you then clear out this Depths, and then sometimes you get a totem that drops a belt and some other rewards. Okay, maybe that's the first time they've encountered that. They then get a Depth again. The music changes or something changes and they notice smoke at the entrance and they think this is a bit different. This is now stage 3. And then they see the boss and then they dive in between the rooms and they kill the boss and they get some rewards. Maybe the rewards aren't good, but now they're like, oh, this can happen, this boss can happen, and we can look for that experience again. So now when they run in the they're running the Abyss, they know that this can happen. Stage 2 and 3 can happen. That motivates the player to keep going and to keep farming. In Breach League, in Breach League, they introduced fragments. So you could play an evening, and you could. I'll move this support link out of the way. You can see these splinters. I'll just turn that off for now. These splinters drop from doing breaches, and then there's something, even if it doesn't explain in their head, like it doesn't explain anything in the game, but in your head you know these build up to something. So even though when you look and hover over it, it says it creates a breach stone, even if it didn't say that, you sort of know in yourself, well, I'm collecting something, this must do something. Once you've collected them, they turn into a breach stone, and then you can run it. That's very logical, because at the end of the evening of mapping, you can go, oh, I'm almost 1/4 of the way to a Yule Natal boss. And a player can really visualize his progress, and that makes it an enjoyable experience because you feel like you've made progress. There are other leagues that do this as well, where the boss, again, feels like you're making progress towards the boss, and that feels fun. Now, with Delve and probably Synthesis going core, I feel like there needs to be a way to introduce that player to the content without spoiling the content and without making it farmable. So what I mean is, when you go to your atlas, you start seeing these blobs, and each time you run one of these blobs, sometimes the shaper takes over the boss and he kind of explains himself, and when you press U, it also tells you where to push the influence and how to complete the storyline. Now, I feel like this has been really fleshed out because it's been in the game a while, and they've sorted a few things out, such as Uber Elder was really hard to spawn. Now it's like a nice flow to it. It's got a set pattern. You know how you're getting your fragments. You know how you're getting your memory fragments. and then you're unlocking Uber Elder, and it flows really well, but at the beginning it didn't. And that's what I feel like with Delve and Synthesis, that there needs to be that flow to it. So when you're playing these, you know that you go to the influence, something different happens. Then this can happen, and sometimes they say contains a memory fragment. The player then knows immediately, this is different. Contains memory fragment, I should go do that, right? And like these, like these pictures, you know there's something different about them. The player is alerted to the fact that you might want to run these. Again, the guide explains it. Push it to... Let me just turn off whispers. Push it to tier 10. Push it to tier 8. Run it, blah, blah, blah. And the player eventually moves it about, and they're introduced to the Shaper, and importantly, introduced. So he pops into the map. He takes over the boss. He alters the boss, and he shoots out the balls. And you sort of know, okay, this guy's different. I want to get to him. I want to know about him. And then you're introduced to Elder, and eventually Elder starts killing the Guardians and all this, and you're like, whoa, I want to get to that boss. Then you might fight a Red Elder that spawns. And these things happen, and even the Elder influence is a bit complicated for people, but you kind of know how to spawn Red and Uber Elder and the lower tier Elders. And people can flow to it, and it feels good, and it works. With Delve League, you never know when you're getting a boss. And some people quit before they see a boss. The same way with Synthesis, some people quit without seeing a boss. So what I would like is, when you initially start your mine, what I think would be a great idea is, if we bring up our pen tool, is when you initially load up your mine, there are set spawns, similar to how the Shaper is sort of set to take over certain maps, and it introduces you. I think there should be set ones. So you could have a depth, let's say depth 20, or you want it lower, it's fine. Okay, let's say whatever the depth you may find. You have a boss here. I'm making them big for obvious reasons. You have a boss here, you have a boss here, and then you have like a boss here. Now, when you're going down the mine shaft, you then see these locations, and you should be introduced to the initial boss. And they should always be there. Then the player has a goal to work towards. Oh, okay, tonight, let's say you put them further down. Tonight, I got to depth 67, and I know that my first boss is going to be here. Is going to be put in here. And you think, that's a good idea, right? I can work my way towards him. Now, when that player traverses all the way down here, and he gets to this boss, right? This isn't the full primeval boss fight, right? But he's introduced to him. Maybe when he goes into the zone, they go into the zone, they think, right, here's this boss, it does some stuff, it maybe does one of its initial whirlwind stages. You kill it, you DPS it down, or you dodge a few of the spells, and then you phase it, and it then says some voice line or some lore about how, you think that's all it's going to take to defeat me, blah, blah, blah. It can then burrow, and then it burrows, right? And then it can say, just simply, when you press U on your map, it can say, fight the whatever boss, right? It can say, fight the so-and-so boss that has burrowed and gone deep into the mine. Then the player has been introduced to the boss, and then thinks, right, I'll work on the mine because I can be introduced to this boss. It might say something like, introduce yourself to the boss, blah, 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 chase it, and then discover the next stage of the boss at level 100. And maybe at level 100, it reveals a new stage, and it can drop some rewards. Now, the rewards aren't too good, so the players don't just farm it or make a new character and re-farm it. But there's something in there for them. Maybe it's a large pot of sulfite. Maybe it's a huge chunk of azurite. It's something that the player goes, I did that piece of content, I was introduced to it, and I was rewarded, and that's helped. So you've killed it, you've chased it at level 20. It then it says on when you press U, it says, find the primeval king at depth 100. You then take on its second stage and it drops a big pot of sulfite or something, right? Or a big pot of azurite, and you get some more upgrades and you think this is great. Then it says continue deeper to find its final form, and then you begin delving down and you don't know when you're going to see it. But importantly, the player's been introduced to the boss, he knows what it's about, and he's got that sense of, he's got it in his head now, like, this is it, I want to travel down and find the boss. Because if you don't get introduced to the boss, like you don't get introduced to liches, or you don't get introduced to shaper, or you don't get introduced to the delve bosses, you can get defeated and you can start to think, well, when is it going to spawn? What is in this area? You could, yeah. So I think set spawns for bosses that don't drop good loot, or drop alternative loot, not like a loot table, but like I say, like the sulfite. Make it more interesting and more of an enjoyable experience to the player than simply RNGing it down and coming across this and thinking, what is that? I've never been introduced to it. Who is this? Why do I care about the Architect's Temple? And I think that because it is core now, there is space in the game again to have this type of thing. So you could say, like, this guy here, he's like he's the pink guy, right? He's the pink guy. So, you know, this is the pink boss. So you have a marker on the map and it says travel to here to introduce yourself to the Grand Architect. You go down and you introduce yourself and he does a bit of his stage. Then he burrows down, or he takes a friggin' minecart shaft and he disappears and he says, blah, 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 you think that's all I've got. Drops a pot of sulfite, drops some azurite explosion, and then you try to find him again. You find him again. You then get maybe a small reward, and then you hunt for his final stage. So that's how I feel like you could do that with the bosses in Delve. You should introduce them, not make them target farmable, not make them drop crazy actual gear, but drop like small upgrades or something that as like a teaser and a way to introduce somebody to doing it. Because when I go to my Nexus core, again, similar, what I think would be a really good thing is when you initially load up your Nexus core and you've done some challenges and you've completed the memories, right? I can't remember the button. So when you go to it, there could just be something as simple as when you load up your Nexus, it says, you know, friggin' welcome, whatever, and let's make it blue. Let's make this one blue, make it slightly smaller. When you travel, there could be one node here, and then when you press the U button, okay, you press U, it says travel to your memory map and tackle the first stage of the Cortex. So then when you go to your memory map, you then go, okay, I can path up to this boss. So you might not path all the way up in one night. You might only get halfway, but the player then realizes, today I made progress. I'm halfway to that boss. So then the next night, he finishes this last bit and he gets to the boss. And he goes into the boss room and he's in the boss room. And again, it introduces him to the mechanics. There's a small piece of whatever lore that plays. You fight a small portion of him. And he then explodes, he disappears, he does whatever. And he says he's now split and he's hidden across the memory map. And then there are, say, like, again, I'm just spitballing these ideas. There are then 4 pieces. Then each night, you know you can travel to each piece, right? You've done this one's done. And then you can travel to this piece. So you can plan your evening and you can think, right, I'm making steady visual progress. Then, once you've tackled, like, his other forms or some other thing, maybe it's head to a deep reward node to discover more maybe it's an intel node, right? Head over to the intel node to discover more about the Cortex boss and reveal his plan or where he's gone, right? And once you've done these 3 areas, it then clears them, and then, I don't know, let's say up here it says head to the Cortex, and then you can go and you can fight the Cortex. And the Cortex doesn't have incredible drops at this stage because it's the very first one. It can drop some gear. Again, maybe it could drop some memory pieces that you could then place in. Maybe it could drop some strong amplifiers. Maybe it could drop some reward nodes like, oh, we've rewarded you with a memory of his days when he fought Parandus, and it's a Parandus memory, and then you pick it up and you place it in the node, and you think, you know what, I fought my way through the 4 corners, and I've earned myself some rewards, and I'm going to place them in. And then after doing the boss, or like early stages of the boss, maybe this isn't the final boss, the player has had multiple evenings, and that's important, I think, has had multiple evenings where he's progressed like linearly, and he can see his progression to these 4 corners or whatever it may be, and then he's headed up to the boss, and he's been rewarded with these pieces, and he can now place these pieces and customize their own experience, and he thinks that was great. I messed about with the new memories, I got some rewards, I put some pieces in, and I got to see the new boss and its content. Then it could say, once you've tackled this one and you've got the reward pieces or whatever it may be, it could then say, like, you know, he's like friggin' Voldemort is hidden to regain his strength. You must now hunt through memories to find a stronger version of the Cortex. And now, you know, again, it can randomly appear. But that's okay, because the player's already been introduced to smaller mechanics and felt the reward of the system. And then you don't mind going through the RNG to find the harder Cortex, the one that drops the really good 3 implicit items, the one that drops the good rings or, you know, whatever it may be, gloves, right? You don't mind that. But what you do mind is, like a player like myself, when you're just seemingly doing random things and you have no idea how to make the next progression step. So that's just my quick idea of, I'd like to see some more introduction to the boss, and I think, honestly, like, that toot my own horn, I think that's a pretty good idea. I feel like introducing a player and having them been able to linearly progress and look at their own progress each evening and think, you know what, I got 2 of those done tonight, I got 1 of those done, hey, tomorrow I'm going to sign in and I'm gonna kill the Cortex. It might be a weak version, I might only get a few memory fragment rewards, but I'm gonna make some progress and I'm gonna see the new boss. Because that's what you could do in Breach League. You could think to yourself, right, I've got the splinters, I am going to see a boss. When I get 98 more of these, I'm going to see a boss, and you can measure your progress. And I think that's what this league lacks, and overall the polish of Path of Exile has slightly worn off, and I think there needs to be a slight sort of bit of work on the introducing content to players, because a lot of it is overwhelming, a lot of it lacks the ability to control the content, and I think the ability to, again, see your progression on that memory map and work towards a weakened Cortex and a stronger one, then you have to hunt for the big one whilst being rewarded, like the Delve boss, is a good thing. So that's my idea for Path of Exile. I thought I'd just place it out there. I don't know what you think, but there we go.